European and Ukrainian officials met in Paris today to begin talks and to plead Kyiv's case to the U.S. Secretary of State and U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Some sources say the high level of diplomacy we're seeing here could signal the mounting frustration that President Trump is feeling with Moscow and Kyiv and their inability to work out a ceasefire agreement. Kyiv and its European allies also say that Moscow is to blame for not being able to reach a deal, and they would like to urge America to take a stronger stance on the matter. French President Emmanuel Macron's foreign policy advisor, Emmanuel Byrnes, was reportedly seen hugging Witkoff as he arrived at Elysee Palace for those talks. But prior to meeting with Rubio and Witkoff, Byrnes met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff, who was also scheduled to take part in the talks with both Rubio and Witkoff. And the Kremlin said that this will be a good opportunity for Witkoff, who met with Russian President Vladimir Putin for around 5 hours just last week, to inform Europeans of the status of the search for a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. And while Russia is open to a peace agreement, they have no interest in stepping down from the fight until everything is worked out, and in a way that they like. In fact, according to this exclusive report from Reuters, Russia plans to use an American-owned canned food company that was seized and taken over by the state in October to supply food to the Russian army. Secretary Rubio said this will be taken into account when discussing U.S.-Russia relations. And this company's new management said the move was necessary to ensure continued production. But the invasion of Ukraine by Russia was expected to be a quick and easy one, but is instead stretched on for over 3 years with no end in sight, at least not right now. And as tensions continue to rise and rise, almost by the minute, Zelensky has said he's open to negotiations, but wants President Trump to come see the state of Ukraine before any peace talks continue.
We want you to come, and I think to come and to see. You think you understand what's going on here. Okay, we respect your position. You understand. But please, before any kind of decisions, any kind of formats of negotiations, come to see people, civilians, warriors, hospitals, churches, children, destroyed or dead. Come, look, and then let's move with a plan how to finish the war.
Here with reaction is John Byrnes, a senior advisor for Concerned Veterans for America. John, thank you for joining me.
Always good to be on, Riley. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to start with those comments on 60 Minutes from Zelensky. What do you make of that?
Well, like you, I watched the whole piece, and I'm sorry, but I don't think he's there where he needs to be yet. I hope that certainly that President Trump gets good information. I think, we've had people on the ground there. We've had pretty good reports of what's going on in the Ukraine. I think we all understand it's a tragic situation. President Trump made that point to Zelensky in the White House a few weeks ago, right, that he's on the verge of starting World War III. So, these are fraught times. It's fraught negotiations. Clearly, from what Zelensky said, as well as what Putin said, they're not yet there, right? They still have a lot of negotiating to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing, John. I think President Trump is caught in the middle. He's got Zelensky, he's got Putin. Both countries have seen a lot of damage since this war began. Obviously, the Russian invasion is horrific and should be condemned, and President Trump has done so. At the same time, though, he's trying to come to a place where we can just stop the bloodshed. He's pushing for a ceasefire. No more killing. No more drone strikes. No more missile strikes from either side. And it seems he's being tugged in two very different directions by two world leaders who openly hate each other. At least that's what's being portrayed publicly. So I don't know where that puts him, but he's starting to say things like maybe, applying more pressure on Russia. Maybe that means sanctions or something else. What do you think about that idea?
Well, I do think that those two men dislike each other very, very, very much. I would say hatred probably sums it up. It's a tense situation. Like you said, we're at a point where we're talking about a ceasefire, and then we have attacks and counterattacks. Yes. And that's very typical. The deeper you get into negotiations, the more it looks like you might actually be getting to a resolution, the harder you want to fight for every last inch that you think you can keep during those negotiations. The biggest takeaway I have from this whole week, from Sunday through today, is while it's not perfect, the Europeans are starting to step up a little more day by day. While they're still asking for the U.S. to stay involved, and they're still, saying that they need U.S. air power to help them enforce a ceasefire and perhaps a peace agreement, they're at least more willing to get in the game. Of course, I don't think that we should be providing air cover or helping them to enforce that. I still think an armed, neutral Ukraine is the way to go. But at least the Europeans are starting to kind of talk some sense and listen to some sense.
Okay, understood. But speaking of, I did want to ask you about what happened on Palm Sunday. All these churchgoers being brutally killed. It is really sad to see, and I think sometimes when we talk about these conflicts, we lose sight of just the impact on civilians, non-combatants, the people that get caught in the crossfire that have nothing to do with these giant geopolitical questions and issues on the world stage. So what do you make of that situation, and do you think it changes things for those peace talks?
Yeah, General Sherman said, "War is cruelty, and there is no refining it." Misquoted often differently, but it's true. War is incredibly cruel. Certainly, Putin is a monster. I mean, the man invaded a sovereign nation over, what he thought was important issues, but still invaded a sovereign nation. There's been death on both sides. Certainly, most of the fighting has taken place inside Ukraine's borders. Yes. Americans tend to have an enormous amount of sympathy for the Ukrainian people, but that doesn't mean we don't want to see the war end and that we don't want to see the bloodshed stop. And if we get a ceasefire working towards a peace agreement, there won't be bombs falling on children on Palm Sunday or other holidays.
Sure, absolutely. Now, I do want to ask you as well about these talks in Paris. I'm not sure what's going to come of them because, like you said, it's really hard to tell where these countries really are and what they really want. I mean, they have some goals that seem to be irreconcilable, and I'm not sure how the Trump administration or any other mediator or broker could navigate that. So I want to turn that question to you. What do you do during a war when you have two world leaders who are very opposed to each other, who also have very different goals for how things are supposed to shake out?
Well, I think you have to approach it as a negotiator in good faith for what the other side, working with both sides, explaining what the other side just can't accept, right?
Right.
President Trump and European leaders should make it clear to Zelensky that Ukraine can't join NATO. It just will be unacceptable to Russia. And the more it looks like it's going to happen, the harder and longer that Putin will prosecute this war.
Yes.
Same thing with Putin. He's not going to get everything he wants, right? He can't have a complete puppet state made up of Ukraine that has no trade in arms with the West, that isn't strong enough to resist another invasion. So you got to show that to each side that the other side has some things that are just like absolutely vital to their sense of independence, their sense of security. And then you work from there. Like, how do we get to a point where we can agree on those? That's negotiations. That's diplomacy. And during wartime, it's very, very difficult. And you have to admire President Trump for stepping up and trying to negotiate this war.
Okay, I really do. I know that he wants to be a peacemaker. I completely support that. I think it's necessary. I mean, this country alone, in the last 20 years, we've seen so many wars, proxy conflicts, especially in the Middle East between Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. It's been pretty brutal in a lot of ways, and we've paid a heavy toll in the last 2 decades. So I understand exactly where the American people are coming from in large part and where President Trump is coming from. And I also think it's fair to say that we can support Ukraine morally and in spirit while also still pushing for peace. In fact, I think that's what support really means. No more bloodshed, no more chaos, no more battle. Let's work this out with our words instead of with our bullets. Everybody will be better off for that, including Ukraine. So I think that's what real support looks like. I wish the Biden administration had pushed harder for that, but those days are over, so I'm just looking to the future. So final thoughts then for you, John. Are you hopeful that at some point soon, maybe in a few months, maybe in the next year or so, we can finally end this war?
I'm hopeful that this war ends within months. I'd like to see it end within weeks. I'm hopeful that as time goes on, Europe will take more ownership for its own security.
Yes.
I'm hopeful that, as you said, that we end some of these forever wars. We're getting there. There are still troops in the Middle East. I hope they come home. But clearly, the biggest security issue in the world right now is this Ukrainian-Russian conflict. And a peaceful solution would bring peace to the continent of Europe. It'll save lives, and it really is the right thing to do.
Yeah, very well said, John, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Riley. Good to talk to you.